Yeah, so I thought it was actually interesting to see how the three different teams work with technology and with technology partners. It seems like, Rob, you are doing things mostly in-house, and then Obayashi has a technology partner, and then Clayco has technology and service provider partner. And so I thought that was kind of interesting to see these different approaches. But do you have questions, comments for the speakers? And yeah, remind everybody with your name and company who you are, since the new day.
Taylor Gilmore. I'm with Mortensen Construction, Integrated Construction Director. I have kind of a technical question for Bexel. On the fit-out 4D, it looked like every single piece of the MEP system was actually coming in. I'm wondering if there had to be a schedule line item for every single element, or if there was another way that you guys approached achieving that.
No, that's a really good question you mentioned. So what we're looking to improve also at Clayco was, I was in my P6, I had an MEP overhead activity. So knowing that we have different trades up in the ceiling and they can't be working on top of one another, you do need to break up that level of schedule activity. So that way it's sequenced correctly. Or if anything, knowing that I need so many column lines ahead with my ductwork contractor versus electrical, I need to at least have that staggered approach in the schedule. So you do need that breakout detail. If that answers it. Right.
But the thing is that maybe Steven didn't mention that the platform itself is actually based on BIM, on 3D elements. So you can create your own schedule without using any other third-party application for schedule itself. Bexel is capable to create schedules, and based on the quality of your 3D model, it can create activities based on that. So if you have, let's say, 3D model which is sliced up to the lowest level of detail, it's going to be scheduled, and the system will create that much activities. If you have, let's say, less detailed 3D model, then it's going to create less level of activities.
Hello, my name is Alex Michalatos, a recent Stanford graduate and founder of BuildCheck AI. We're a startup using AI to check design compliance for buildings. Questions for Rob about synthetic data. So I just wonder if you could talk more about your decision to use synthetic over your natural data set and how you went about creating that data set as a synthetic one, maybe in the context of shear walls, if you want.
Yeah, the reason is because, actually, even if we have 1,000 projects, it's still probably not enough data to train a robust model. So, and it's very difficult, very time-consuming to extract data. And sometimes we are missing some of the inputs, actually, that go into making the decision of why that column is that size. Sometimes, it's not logical, let's just say. Many building designs are not 100% logical. The other thing is, so on the synthetic data side, we have some very smart engineers who know Python and who know the codes and know how to write the exact algorithms to produce, the data set from basically in Python. And we use Python because it's fast. And we've been using an open source tool called OpenSeas for a lot of the data set creation up at Oregon State University. We do some of our own in-house, but in many ways, designing beams and columns is actually pretty simple. It's just that, again, that the domain experience about knowing what is practical and what is common and what the right inputs are and what outputs are and what we have access to in terms of inputs at early stage of design is really important. So that's why we went to the synthetic generation method.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. This is Luis Clavijo from Colombia. We have a consultancy company in BIM. I would like to ask Clayco about if you have like a an automated way to map data of spatial breakdowns and then get them to Bexel in order to like foster or make quicker loops in data scheduling procedures in order to like having multiple recipes for the right strategy of sequencing and construction. So you have any automation on that mapping for that data?
Actually, that's a really good question that I think is an attribute of Bexel, especially with vertical story type construction. Bexel it identifies things by that spatial structure, by level. What often happens, though, it's not a very clean vertical structure that takes place when the file is imported. Certainly doesn't align with the schedule. So in Bexel, it's got some great efficiencies about reallocating elements to those levels quickly and purging unused levels to be clean. Nomenclature, I'm stressing internally right now, is very important between what your WBS level and schedule is to your alignment in the model. So isn't perfect yet, but it cleans up, and that's one of the first, we kind of have a playbook on 4D, we call it. That's one of the first procedures. You need to align your spatial structure for schedule to match. But like Meletta mentioned, the scheduling in Bexel is a powerful tool in that it understands elements by level, different than Synchro when it comes to understanding that. So it's smarter intelligently to go up. But
if we have information on each element, either spatial information or any common property, we can filter them, use them as a selection set, and it's a really easy way to create selection sets in Bexel Manager using property. And also, if we have spaces which are imported from Revit, we can create a clash test between spaces and find out all the elements inside that space and group them as one in one room. That's also a method.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
just a short addition related to zoning. For example, if you have already specific properties or information related to zones, the system will use this information and automatically put the elements into specific zone, and the system also create a schedule based on these zones for different planning purposes. If you don't have it, then you can use the manually to create your own zones in the Bexel Manager itself.
My name is Enoch Chow, Director of Digital Engineering for Civil Construction. So I have two questions. One for Rob first. First question I have is regarding the kind of the data set from the TD Intranet. So is there any safeguard or concern about bias in terms of we're generating a language model based off TT knowledge rather than a larger group knowledge? So that's the first question about that. The second question is for Mr. Hiro. Amazing presentation, thank you. Wanted to ask about the metrics you're tracking, because we see examples of object identification and classification, right, with the construction site activity. So once you've identified it's an excavator, right, or it's a dump truck, what do you do with that kind of tracking? What defines as productivity from that point onwards?
So maybe I'll go first. So the interesting part about the bias is that we actually our goal is actually Thornton Thomas City bias. We actually want that sort of an answer comes from a certain question. We actually want the bias of Thornton Thomas City to be in that. Of course, not by the bad bias that you think of in terms of diversity or something, which is actually an issue, by the way. We actually do have people scraping old posts that may not be appropriate for consumption from the rest of the company. That is an issue. But in terms of technical bias, we are actually, that's a goal for us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thank you for that question. So what Mitsuhiro was tracking on the construction side with the excavator and those machines was basically the running hours. So whether the machine was running or not, whether the machine is just there doing nothing or actually working. So he used the data to analyze the excavators and the machines, whether we have enough of them or not, so that he can reschedule those schedule and so on. So basically, we're tracking the productivity. Yeah.
Hello, good morning. First, congratulations for the presentation. My name is Álvaro. I am from Peru. I work in Productiva. Reference for our company to the 4D model. At what stage of the project was it developed? And who was involved in the planning? And if it was done in early stage, how did you manage to them involved in that stage?
Great question. Related to the stage of the project, right? And we actually had this discussion last night about when it makes sense, right? So early, what I consider the best phase as well is early in the design phase, right? Is that design modeling side to accelerate the timeline, but also get that construction input in, right? Because handing the design model over to construction, oftentimes you'll hear, how do we build from this? This isn't broken up enough or by level or by horizontal zone. So earlier the better to really take advantage of that opportunity. And then it also starts aligning and you get a good idea on the timeline picture as well as subcontractor input when developing the schedule and also their fabrication models. So early.
George Webb from Seattle. We're doing a multifamily wood frame construction. We're just starting our design studio, trying to get full VDC in place as quickly as we can. My question's for Robert. It looked like the AI that you had, you showed, got pretty close to designing the building. So how close are you to actually designing the building without a lot of human interaction? And what work do you have left to do to get to that point?
Well, it's on? Yeah. We are very close. I mean, again, what I say we probably can get to a design development level pretty quickly. Now, that is like a level that is not sort of like, is not going to be very, very like crazy buildings. It's not going to be Zaha Hadid buildings. But for the more conventional buildings, we can get to, DD very quickly. And that's all we want in those early stages. We just, because we iterate, throw a lot of things out. So we want to just use the AI to sort of, iterate through the design process.
Great presentation. My name is Shichi. I'm from Seattle as well, working with Hathaway Dinwiddie, general contractor in the States. A question for Robert. Thank you so much for introducing other great AI applications. Just wondering, some of the application might be more accuracy sensitive than others. For example, the structure design, related to the question George just asked. You mentioned the accuracy could be like 90 to 95%. Just wondering how we bring that 90 to 95 into potentially 99 or 98, and how we filled up the gap, and if this application were more useful for the preliminary design phase only. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so, again, I'm a structural engineer, still do structural engineering on large-scale projects. There's not a building ever designed that is within 99%. They're usually over-designed to some extent for wind issues or seismic issues or whatever it may be, or just because someone was lazy that day and decided not to design very accurately. So the answer is we're not looking, our goal for AI is not for the final design. It is for the early design phases. It's very similar to Copilot and things that you hear about GitHub and Microsoft Copilot. It's just a tool that will get an engineer very close to an answer significantly faster than what they could do manually.
Tyler Davis, Whiting Turner. Question's a little bit for internal software development. Obviously, Rob, you've done a ton of it internally, and I think a lot of the firms in this room probably have dabbled either internally and hired, developers in that realm, or consultants and played on that. And my question is, in the AEC world, you're solving for a problem that the software doesn't exist. Like, there isn't a good software tool out there, so you solve for that internally. I think just from the group here, what is more of that going to happen internally, Or is more of that going to happen externally? Is there, like how is that going to play out inside our firms? Are we going to have more proprietary tools that are just for TT or just for Clayco or just for Whiting Turner? Or are we going to start to see those tools branch out, into a market, so to speak? I mean, there is a little bit of market there, but just some of your viewpoints there.
That's a great question. I mean, you can see throughout the entire group here that we've created our own software for our very specific use cases. Creating software is not easy. It takes a larger team, and I will say, 5 years ago we did it all in house. Now we do outsource some of it because it makes sense. There's we can do it. So there are some outsource firms that do things very well, specific types of software. So I think that firms should create their own tools that suit their workflow. Yeah, we have. So we created our own software, Construe. It's an interoperability platform. That's one. T2D2 is another one. It's a completely separate company. One of our AI models that was in the original Asterisk program is now within TestFit Inc. So we are selling those aspects. It's why not?
Yep. I had this is also a question I had. So thanks for bringing that up. I had a question for the Obayashi presentation. Operating cranes autonomously, flying drones autonomously, getting, and some of the other questions already getting a richer set of information very, very quickly. To me, it seems like you might need different kind of skills to manage a project like this. Did you bring different kinds of people to this project, or did the people that you have typically managing project pick up these technologies very easily and running with it and managing this complex project?
So thank you for the question. He already asked before, so we discussed and I translated. So regarding the new skills, since we deployed the drones, now the managers don't have to go to the site physically, which makes for the managers now they need to do more accurate direction. They need to do more accurate judgment. So, and this is not something easily done by AI because of the lack of the data set, as we discussed. So this kind of skill is still going to be needed on site, and we have to keep learning those managers and keep those people on site. Is this answering your question? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll take a break.
Hi there, Jacob Raskin with Structured Tone Building Group. Thanks very much for all these really insightful and brilliant creations that you guys are working on. Question more towards Clayco and Bexel, I think. Are there any insights that you guys are seeing already that you're willing to share from some of the 5D modeling or 4D modeling, perhaps? You showed what I as a contractor observed as kind of that east to west work plan. I was curious if you guys are seeing anything, running any models perhaps that say maybe start in the middle and work towards the outside rather than start at one end and work to the other. Or something much more cool that I'm not yet thinking of.
No, that's really good. I mean, what I often hear too from like superintendents that tell me is I'm finally getting a visual to what I've been thinking in my head from 2D drawings, right? Because they're so used to seeing 2D drawings in the trailer, and I'm showing them how we showcasing that. And what is also, we mentioned tech planning a little bit yesterday. It is encouraging that we start looking at, zoning and how we highlight drawings up and understanding what work are we optimizing in this area and what can we work in parallel. I'm a scheduler, so I always try to build a schedule out conservatively, knowing that there will be issues and we need to mitigate later. So we often are now optimizing earlier that approach and looking at the common workflow to not overlap trades. Line of balance is a great concept that Melita's really implemented for us too, in that we're able to collect the BIM model in a way that we can identify all our procurement, all necessary work in this location, and then optimize and make sure we're managing that effectively. So.
Yeah, just to add, the similar conclusion that we had yesterday. I mean, most of the presenters yesterday mentioned that specific level of education is needed. So we also believe that in order to embrace full potential of, let's say, BIM, VDC implementation, you need specific level of education of all participants in the project, and also you need more collaboration between different parties or different stakeholders in the project, and also different trades, meaning that all this information can be shared early on, and then the most important thing is to share that information throughout the entire process. So it's not just design and modeling just for a purpose of providing sheets and drawings. You need to have idea that your 3D model can be used for more purpose later on in the next stages. So the main idea is to add specific information through the entire, let's say, life cycle, adding layers of information in each stage. So by the end of, or by the beginning of construction, the construction company can use all this information to create more efficient schedule, to perform better on site, to have more accurate cost estimate, and also by the end, the general contractor with all subcontractors needs to add more layers of information so the project owner can use that information for facility maintenance.
All right, please thank our speakers.